Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Movie Nights interview. I am privileged to be here with the amazing director of the upcoming documentary American Clown, Mr. Guilford Adams. Thank you so much for being here.
Hey, Dalton, thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Yeah, again, thank you. And there's nothing more valuable than someone's time, and so the fact that you're giving me some, it means a lot. And I want to use that time properly and talk about American Clown, but also just for my audience who may be unfamiliar, I want to learn more about you. So my first question, if you don't mind, is just, give us your origin story, give us your background. Where do you come from, and how did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, well, I see. I'm an actor here in Los Angeles, and I came via Texas. A lot of us Texan actors kind of like work our way uh, out westward as opposed to the East Coast. But I got into clowning when I was in junior high, really, and learned animal balloons and all that sort of stuff. And then, like a lot of people in high school, I got distracted with girls and sports and that sort of stuff. And then I kind of found my way in college again when I quit my athletic sort of dreams. I was a springboard diver and I got into acting, but kind of via a physical route because I had been doing flips and stuff, and I kind of brought that to the table as an actor. So a lot of Shakespeare and clowning type stuff and those characters, and I was thrown around stage a bunch and stuff. And then when I moved out to LA, it just seemed like a natural fit to kind of do that on the weekends so I could have my weeks free for auditions and that stuff. And so I got really in, I started my own clown company after working for people for a while. And I just discovered that I really enjoyed doing it. I got really passionate about it. And that was always been my side hustle, sometimes my main hustle if the acting is a little bleak at the time. And because of it, because I have a company named it's Los Angeles Clown, and it Googles well, and it has for the past 20 years. So, I get calls from producers and directors and stuff for all their clown needs. And one of those jobs turned into a job with the McDonald's Corporation, or the owners and operators of Southern California McDonald's. And so I assisted Ronald in the field for a little bit until kind of everything kind of came crashing down in around 2017, and that's kind of where the documentary kind of starts.
Gotcha, gotcha. And give us some insight into what inspired this story, why this story needed to be told. Because, based off of a lot of what I've seen from it, it dives into not only just, the educating the public on Clown School and what it does and the people it's produced, but also the misconceptions about it, the public perception changing of what a clown used to be versus what they're seen as now. And, so that dive in 2017, this is an assumption. I guess it had to do around with like the clown trend craze that was going on at the time. Or if I'm not, please inform me. But, what was the catalyst of that event and how did it kind of inspire this story to need to be told?
Well, while we were all there was a bunch of us that worked as assistants to Ronald, kind of in the greater, really in North America, maybe 100 of us. There was a bunch of scary clown stuff that was kind of hitting the airwaves, and I would get calls through my clown company all the time saying, "Oh, are these scary clowns impacting what you do?" It's like, well, I mean, I suppose because you guys keep pushing this, I don't know, you're stoking this thing, and and they wanted me to talk on, on film about it and how it was, and I just felt like this is kind of this is you guys are producing this thing. It kind of came right at 2016, a presidential election, so there was just a lot of sort of hysteria and the blending of news and entertainment and that sort of stuff. And it was around
Mhm.
that time that all of these things started ending. The Ronald program that I was a part of ended. Barnum and Bailey Circus ended. The Big Apple Circus kind of closed their doors. And this horror clown was really kind of spreading their wings again. They had done it in the 80s with Stephen King's first hit, but then all of a sudden it was like it's coming out. And then there's going to be like another part two. And then the Joker was coming out. There's just a bunch of Hollywood mainstream media really embracing the horror clown in a way that we hadn't seen before. And still to this day, that takes up a lot of the space. And when dealing with kids, I'll go to kids' parties all the time and they'll say, "Aren't all clowns scary?" And I'm like, no, 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 no. That's my cousin Pennywise. He's gone all Hollywood. And that started to really ask these questions. At that time, we were into the doc a little bit. We had started it because the Ronald program was ending and wanted to film it. but it was that around that time that I felt kind of more like, oh my gosh, there aren't good ambassadors for kids anymore that are clowns. The in my generation we had the Ronalds and the Bozos and then everybody in between, but these kids don't see anybody but Pennywise or Art the Terrifier now. They just don't. So of course to them they're all scary. That's this thing. We just have very low representation that's positive. And there's a lot of positive stuff that still goes on. There's medical clowning. There's people like Puddle's Pity Party that still does a bunch of touring stuff. I mean, clowning's still happening, but I think in sort of people's eyes, what they see most is the sort of horror clowns. And so I just really set out to make a doc, and not to kind of banish the horror clowns, or I mean, they're fine, I have nothing against them. I just don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, and I think there's more clowns than just those, and we all kind of want a seat at a seat at the table. And so I'm just trying to, it's kind of like that little, if you can't find a seat, then go ahead, grab a lawn chair. And that's kind of what we're doing here.
Yeah, that it's such a fascinating insight to hear. And speaking of just making a doc, something that I find interesting about a lot of documentaries is that, and you kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier, where you start making it with one purpose and then you don't really know what documentary you have until you're really in the editing room and you look at all the footage, and then that's where the story really kind of comes together. So I wanted to ask you, was there a moment while making this documentary where when you were shooting it you're like, oh, this is what this is about, and then when you got in the editing room you were like, wait, it's actually about this? Or was it kind of always a vision from beginning to end?
No, no, not at all. And I think the producers had obviously we wanted to tie it up. I mean, the narratively, what works really well without giving away plot spoilers is
Mm-hmm.
want it to go through and everything's good though, and everyone is and it just felt like, and I wanted it to do that and kind of end with medical clowning, and to do some of that beautiful work, because when you see it and you see these two performers go into a hospital, and a lot of it you can't necessarily film because of HIPAA regulations and privacy for patients and that stuff, so that in itself is kind of an albatross to deal with. But the work itself, and trying to explain the work and having practitioners that do it, is very captivating. But the program that I worked with, like, they lost their funding, and so then we were out, at least our specific hospital. So it wasn't reaching to this sort of climactic conclusion that I really wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And we found that the circus came back, the Ringling Brothers, and so the producers were like, "Oh, we got to talk about this." And I went and I Googled and I researched it, and I was like, "Well, they did come back, but they came back without clowns." And then they're like,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh, well, how do we tie that in?" I was like, "Well, I don't know if we do." I think that's just one more sort of like nail in the proverbial coffin. I'm not saying that clowning is dead. I'm saying that we are at this sort of edge of the pendulum swinging, and it's like we're waiting for a course correct. But right now, it's pretty bare for a lot of performers, and if people are clowning, professionals are clowning in a cirque-like show, or they're doing something with less makeup, and it's a little bit, almost, a clown in disguise, so yeah, it's a unique situation. So no, it did not. We had an idea of what we wanted to happen, and then something else did happen, which is a lot of what, making a documentary film is about. And but I think it really, I also kind of found the love, like the love for clowning, and kind of being able to talk to other clowns about what they loved about it. And my idea with the doc was to take away the grease paint for a minute and just to show you this person behind it, because I think sometimes we don't get to see that. And if you're doing it well, and if you're really trying to maintain this sort of this experience for people, the two faces, you don't see them together. You see me, and then I step away, and then you see a clown. I'm looking in the back there, and you've got a Superman, and you just go, one part is Clark Kent, parts like that,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and that's great. I love it. And there's an element, though, for us, Superman is Superman because of his age. We know he's Clark Kent, but we kind of buy into this concept that once Clark Kent's gone, this new person emerges. And I'm very much that clown. And most of
Hmm.
us are, that like that you don't see Gil anymore. Gilly comes out or whatever else. Like if you saw Superman putting on, his unitard, you'd be like, hey, what's up? Like, oh dude, this is awkward. I gotta get dressed real quick to kind of do and it ruins the illusion. So I
Hmm.
think we try to maintain that illusion for kids. I try not to eat in face. I try not to, that's what we'd call if we're in clown makeup, eat in face. I don't want to. There's just some standard, you don't drink or smoke, or there's a whole sort of like a guidelines that you do as a clown, most of which I follow. But I think you want to keep that mystery alive for people.
No, of course, and the insights you have from going to clown school and being a clown is very interesting. And the documentary interviews a lot of very A-list people who may or may not be known that they have experience being a clown or going to clown school. Like there are interviews with Steve-O and David Arquette and John C. Riley. And I just wanted to ask, were these people that you knew in clown schools at the time, or was this a connection that you made later on? And would people be surprised at just how many performers started off going through the, magical art of clown school and clowning in general?
Oh, I think people would be surprised by the amount of people that have kind of a a a bevy of clown training under their belt. Um, each person is different. I mean, John C. Riley, I did his kids' parties when they were kids,
Nice.
and I've been doing this for a long time, and that was 20 years ago. But we've stayed friendly, and I'll bump into him sometimes. As big as LA is, it can also be a small town too for people and circles and that sort of stuff. Steve-O, I auditioned to get into clown school in 1997 for Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey. They had one in Sarasota, but at the time, I didn't know this. I just gotten out of college and I auditioned. Steve-O got in that class, as well as a
Hmm.
bunch of people that later became my friends: Matt Walker, Matt Morgan, Tina Groff, just a bunch of people. And and so I reached out to one of them because they knew Steve-O from clown school or from and so I said, hey, do you think you'd do this doc? And at the time, he lived in LA and he did. It was before the pandemic hit. And he was wonderful and sweet. David Arquette, I did a movie with called Saving Flora in 2016. And I knew I follow him on social media and we're friendly as well. And I saw that he bought the rights to Bozo.
Hmm.
So, I just thought, well, that's a huge piece of it. I want to see what he's doing with it. And, he's working on his own stuff, but our things kind of aligned a little bit. And there was some overlap, and he was happy to talk to me, on our doc. And, he's a big ally for clowns and is still kind of pushing Bozo to kind of new frontiers. So that was all exciting, and Bill Irwin I got because, he's like the North Star for a lot of my generation if they were interested in clowning and acting. And he's a Tony Award winning actor as well as just he's a master clown. And I somebody knew him, somebody that I had my friend Ambrose, who was also in the class of '97. He was like, oh, I know Bill Irwin, I can put you in touch. So I just got kind of lucky with a lot of that stuff. I mean, it's when you work in the community long enough, it's like you might not know the next person, but somebody knows them, and so that they can usually put a line out for you.
Right. No, that I mean it's again just fascinating. And something that I wanted to bring up as well, because you'd mentioned this was done at part of it was done at a time before the pandemic. And I
Yeah.
wanted to talk about the pandemic a little bit because in my research, when I was just like, looking at everything, I saw this an amazing article that you did with the Los Angeles Times during COVID. And kind of and you explaining like in 2017, like just 3 years before, like how things are really starting to get bad and then boom, like the whole world shut down. And I
Yeah.
couldn't imagine like where clowning was at that time, getting hit with this on top of it. And so, in your experience, and not to tread on an interview you've already done, but in your experience during that time, how much of a gut punch was that with where clowning already was, and how were you able to kind of navigate that to like look at a more positive outlook for the future?
Well, the only thing, I mean, the pandemic really kind of took everybody out. So there was kind
Mhm.
of a saving grace in that, it's kind of like it's being sidelined sucks, but then when everyone's sidelined, you're like, well, I guess we're all in the same boat now. it's the great leveler,
Mhm.
So that was tough, but we had already been through some hard times, and I think receipts for most clowns were down. Maybe you've got some more people asking for the horror clown, or they want that, or maybe you're busier, you're picking up a couple gigs around Halloween or whatever, that is. I think in a lot of ways, I don't know if it's and I've thought about this a lot. Like, I don't know if it's like exclusively clowns were getting just kind of like, just mangled. I I think it was almost as if I felt like we were kind of the canary in the coal mine for a lot of
Mhm.
stuff, that it was, and I still kind of feel like that, that this was just, it was just a, we were on the front lines, as it were, and so this is just a delayed response that everybody's going to be kind of hit. And then the pandemic almost kind of like helped that sink in a little bit. Like, okay, now we're all out of a job, and that, and
Mhm.
not that I took some glee in that. It just felt like this is, this is what it felt like for us 3 years ago. Now
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
all, um, but then, crawling out of that, as we all did at the time, really was educational for me, and talking to people, and having them, just like we all did, like doing clowning over Zoom. And we were also clowning, typically such a physical, and I've got to be in your immediate sort of like vicinity space. It has to be a live location, that in a lot of ways, it kind of it sparked some, I don't know, some real sort of like can do it attitude, because you're like, well, let's get out there. How do we do this? How do we do this again? What do we do? So in a lot of ways, I think it was rejuvenizing a little bit.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's nice to kind of have like the positive, like, rebuild outlook from that. And going back to American Clown, we've touched upon it, and we've touched upon just, the challenges that you face, not only making the doc, but just of the clown world in general. I want to put a positive, out there. While making this documentary, what would you say was like one of your favorite memories or fun things that you got to experience or see, while making this film?
It really occurred to me, obviously I'm part of this clown world, and I kind of see the obstacles that we're facing, maybe more than just a layman that's like not even interested in clowns and has no idea what I'm talking about. They'd be, like, oh, I haven't seen a lot of clowns. I haven't, like, it's like, like he doesn't even know, or they don't know what they've been missing, because I don't think about it. I don't think about that world at all. Um, but then, I think being able to talk to people in a way, or reach people when people probably haven't given it a lot of thought, has been very rewarding for me. Like starting the conversation. It's a double-edged sword, because, you know, while talking about it, people are like, "Oh, is that a thing? People hate clowns." And then there's another one that's just like, feels like they're already on your side. Like, yeah, it's weird like that. I don't know. I don't get that. So it feels like, you're already preaching to the choir for most of them, and then some of them just are apathetic and don't care to begin with. So,
Yeah.
that can be a challenge, but that's like that for any subject. Um, but I also was very amazed, and after doing the doc with, there's lots of clowns that work in different specific fields, like a rodeo clown. Rodeo clown does something what I consider totally different, but in a lot of ways, when I was sitting down and talking to our sort of rodeo clown, JJ Harrison, who's, there's probably like 12 of these guys that do this across America. And he was saying these things were, about having the heart of a clown, and you can't just throw face paint on anybody and without and have them be a clown. And I just like, oh God, you're a clown. Not that that was
Mhm.
ever in doubt. Like, I'd always call him as a clown, but it just was like, oh, that's like, these are the same identifiable characteristics that I feel like you need as a kid's clown. So these are just, this is part of being a clown. Is it's like those it's like for lack of I have young kids, so excuse me. Like a stormtrooper is a stormtrooper, right? Even if there's a desert stormtrooper, there's a stormtrooper that's on indoor, there's a storm, there's just like they're all stormtrooper, So it kind of was this thing like, oh yeah, we're clowns, but like we have the same set of skills, and his set of skills isn't juggling, but he can ride. This is the rodeo clown. He can ride on an inflatable, suit with range in his mouth and just kind of like make a fool of himself. Like that's his set of
Hmm.
skills. So it became kind of like I don't know, it felt very universal. Like, oh yeah, like we have just different outfits. We're the same. We're the same.
Yeah, no, that's amazing to hear. And I also just wanted to ask, when someone watches American Clown and they're being exposed to the story and just learning more about clowns and the heart of them, the passion of them, if there was one thing that you wanted someone to take away from this movie, from this story, and you're just like, I hope if anything they walk away with this, what would that one thing be?
Well, I would hope that they would think that they have the capacity to find the clown in them,
Mm,
and to keep that thing alive. And I hope that they could also realize that there is a danger to getting rid of all of these, or a danger to just without thinking, saying like, "Oh yeah, I hate clowns too," without really giving it some real thought, because that sort of just that overall malaise of anything that you don't quite understand, I think can be super defeating for the legions of people that do enjoy that. Like,
yeah.
don't be a joy killer just because you don't see the joy. Um, I mean, that's fine. Just be like, it's not my thing or whatever. But just to say, oh, I don't like them, or to use this sort of, I don't know. Like, I think we should think before we make those statements. Lately, I know we're in a very politicized environment, and I get it, and I don't really uh, broach this too much in the doc, but I don't like the way that clown is like used all the time with people.
Mm.
And I understand that's just cement, it's like, look at these clowns in office. It's like, well, okay, let's be honest here. I mean, it'd be a little more entertaining if it was real clowns. So let's just be careful about how we use this. And I'll give you one more example that I thought was very interesting. Um, when these clown scares were coming into California, where they say, this sort of salacious story. They kept saying stuff like, and this clown was, scaring children. And it's like, but they're using this in a very, this clown, like they're giving it the same import and stature that they would anything. I mean, let's say if we use a different example, if there was a guy dressed in a really crappy police uniform pulling over people and like flashing himself to this person. And the news is reporting it like a police officer pulled over so and so and was flashing. They wouldn't say that. Let's be honest. They just wouldn't say that because that is a mischaracterization of what happened. They would say, a guy dressed in a police uniform. They would specify. So I'm curious why we say clown and because it's like what it's a base enough job that like we don't really care that if it hurts the other people that do this job. But I just ask yourself why is that said like that, and I don't have the answer to it, but I think we could be more careful with that stuff, possibly. But this is asking a lot of a country that is kind of going through its own inner strife to what whatever it's going through. So I think it's small potatoes in comparison to a lot of the other justices. I'm not trying to say that this should be first and forefront, but I do want to say language matters, you
Hmm.
know, and I'm curious about why news organizations owned by entertainment companies decide to do what they do. That's all
Yeah, no, it's amazing insight. And, it's something that I didn't even think about is, when the quote killer clown craze was going on, there was no specificity of these people pretending to be clowns. It was just they identified them as clowns. And like
Yeah.
that, you bringing that up, like I can literally see, like, oh my God, that's very damaging. Like that's very not right to like lump that into this beautiful art form that's supposed to bring joy. Like that just occurred to me. So like I'm glad that you said that, and it's very eye opening. And
Well, I appreciate that. And it's salacious. It's like
mhm,
and doing it on purpose. It's not a mistake.
mhm,
It's on purpose, but I don't think they, and I guess whatever the ramifications or the effect is kind of a negligible for them, like, but who really cares? So and then and but it and it becomes just kind of like, so this is entertainment then. Let's be honest about that. This is not news,
Hmm.
entertainment. This is like clickbait. This is
Right.
this is gonna, and that's what it was to me. This was a clickbait story that worked its way into national news because I think the bigger story is that we don't have really an open news source. We don't have or we as viewers can't be trusted to know what's important or not. There's a couple different takeaways from there, but I think it speaks to a little bit of the tail wagging the dog, and I think that should be
Mm.
concerning for us. Is it really? Are we going to get the real news?
Yeah.
Is this real news here, or what's going on? So I think, and maybe the sharks jumped the maybe we've jumped the shark on that because we don't get real news anymore. I don't know. That's above my pay grade for the shoes I wear.
No, no, but it's all fascinating and very sound analysis, and I appreciate the insight. So for this film, obviously we want as many people to watch this film as possible. If I'm not mistaken, it's currently in its festival run. Could you give some details on that for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So we will be premiering at Dances with Films on June 23rd, which is like, God, it's like 9 days away here in the beautiful Hollywood, California. So it should be a really, really fun experience. We're there at 7 p.m. That's our world premiere. And then after that, we've got a couple other possibilities for film festivals. And then the hope is to do either a small theatrical run, which I think we would do like a almost like a little trunk show with, which I think could be very fun. Or we would just go directly to streaming. But we don't have the distribution deal set in place. That's part of what the festival run is for.
Hmm.
I haven't done a lot of any crowdsourcing. This has all just been self-financed. It started off small enough, and then as anybody knows, that kind of makes a film towards the end. You're like, maybe I should have done some crowdfunding.
It just
Ah,
grows. Yeah.
yeah, it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. But it's relatively, it's micro budget, so it's like it hasn't been brutal. And again, it's something that I've just been passionate about. So I've really wanted to do it, and it's not going to solve the crisis, or I think this is something that we just have to live with. But I'm just hoping it'll give people like just a pause. There's so many things in our and I'll get on my soapbox for a second. As an actor in the union, and as like there's just a frightening amount of uh jobs and enterprising things that people have developed over the past 100 years that I just feel are in real danger of being swept under the mat with stuff like independent contractor and all this. It's just there's unions, whether I'm an actor in the union and everything's non-union now, or and we're just right on the brink of AI. I think it's important to just set the record for kind of what's been done up until now, and the work that's been put in, because I don't know what it's going to be like for the next 50 years. I mean, nobody does, obviously, but I do worry about some sort of proprietary things, and those being stripped away with the sort of like with the possibility of AI and with the possibility of the conglomeration of all these major entities that just want to chase the almighty dollar. So I think it's important to kind of at least have a record of of what went on in the past.
No, absolutely. And, as someone who's an outsider, I think even I can make the astute observation that one of the first things you need to be a clown is a human soul. And I don't think that will ever die. And, I hope that I'm very excited for this film. Thank you so much for giving me the time to talk about it with me today. And I can't wait to hear about how Gangbusters, the premiere at the festival, goes, because I know it's going to do great. So
Uh,
again, just thank you for everything, and thank you for your time today.
Dalton, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It's been great
And of course,
talking.
of course. And last thing before you go, if you want to plug your social media or social media for the film, please let everyone know where they can find it.
Sure. So American Clown Movie on Instagram, AmericanClownMovie.com too. I don't think we have an email list set up, but just follow us on Instagram, American Clown Movie. And we can kind of keep updated with news, or if there's going to be kind of a screening in your area, and also the possibility of our potential distribution with streaming and all that sort of stuff. And one final note, let's just all agree between you and I that we don't lose the kid inside of us, the kid that just that is optimistic about the future, that thinks that kids are our best chance of getting ourselves out of this mess, that wants to laugh and and create joy in uncertain times, because I think we need that. There's something to say about uh a lot of people in power that don't have the ability to laugh at themselves.
Hmm.
The fact that we can, I feel like it to me, it's just like it's the biggest sword ever, and I don't want to let that go. That's like our superpower.
Yeah, thank you. That was wonderful and beautiful. And guys, please, whenever it is available, follow American Clown, watch American Clown. It's going to be great. As always, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.